In the movie The Sixth Sense with Bruce Willis, and sorry for the spoiler alert, it is revealed that Cole, the main character of the movie, sees dead people. And at the end of the movie, we see a ghost, Kira, a little girl who is sick for many years, who eventually died from unknown causes. She eventually led Cole to a videotape, and the video horrifically shows Kira's mother giving her medicine, yet it turned out that she was actually poisoning her, keeping her perpetually sick, which eventually led to her death. Then Cole, who has the videotape, gives it to the little girl's dad at Kira's funeral. And as the dad watches, he experiences the full betrayal of trust from his wife, realizing the horrific truth that his wife, Kira's mom, was the one who poisoned her and wound up killing their precious little girl. The type of appalling behavior Kira's mom exhibited in the movie would be diagnosed by clinicians as factitious disorder imposed on another, FDIA, which you might know by its older name, Munchausen by proxy. And that occurs when a person falsely claims that their child is sick when they aren't. Or it is when a person causes injury or disease in another person for twisted purposes. Now, this may sound controversial, but I believe that there is a church version of this tragedy that can aptly be called Church Factitious Disorder Imposed on Another, CFDIA. It is a term that I have coined that I think explains the religious betrayal trauma that some people experience leaving the church. Yes, there are some good and healthy churches, but that's not what we're talking about here. There are many religious trauma survivors who feel much like Kira and her dad. They thought they were sick and lovingly being taken care of by the church, which was the only one to really address their inner fears, their aches, existential angst, and debilitating problems of life. They thought it was a safe space where the church was nurturing them with the medications of sermons, worship music, Bible studies, and altar calls, and everything else that the church was offering. And there came a point in time when they made new mental connections between their internal aches, pains, and longings and the medications the church was feeding them, that the wheels came off and they had their WTF moment. I know I certainly had this moment myself, or several of them. Once they stopped denying, suppressing, and repressing their doubts, they slowly realized the madness of what was going on. They were experiencing the consequences of church factitious disorder imposed on another. As a result, individuals, they may experience profound distress, confusion, and trauma upon realizing the betrayal of trust and the realization that the very institution they believed to be a source of spiritual healing was in fact causing harm to their well-being. Through the teachings of the church, they, like Kira, were fed constant poison. They were told that they were sick inside, so sick that they could do nothing good at all. They were told they were paralyzed by sin. They were told that their feelings were instruments of the devil. They were told that their bodies were not to be trusted and their desires were fleshly and ungodly. They were told that their hearts and minds were desperately wicked above all things. The sicker they felt, the more they desired the saving medication the church offered. That is, until they realized what was going on. The betrayal the dad felt in the movie Sixth Sense is similar to the feelings that many awakened people feel toward the church. Similar to the devastating consequences of FDIA in the medical context, CFDIA leaves individuals grappling with the aftermath of spiritual poisoning as they come to terms with the deceptive practices employed by the church. And many victims of church factitious disorder imposed by another move from shock and disbelief to the feelings of betrayal, of disgust and rage. Let me share a story with you. about a woman named Sophia. Sophia, a woman I met who was suffering from religious trauma, after coming to grips with what the church was doing to her, said, and I quote, "I can't believe they told me who I was in my core was rotten. I can't get over the fact that they had me believing in a God who despised me yet loved me and would punish me if I didn't follow the path he set out before me. There was so much fear, so much shame. For what? I wasn't even sick to begin with. They were the ones who were sick to feed me that shit. I make mistakes, but I'm not evil in my core. Loving my body, my sexual desires, and just loving myself is not bad. It's good." And they told me it wasn't. And now that I'm not going to that toxic church and listening to that nonsense, she says, "I feel freer than ever." Let me share another person's story with you. Darius is a man in his mid-30s who spent much of his early childhood immersed in religious activities. His parents were very religious and they went to church often, sometimes three times a week. And he has been a worship leader in a Baptist church for the past 5 years. During our conversation, he shared that he loves God, but has always felt a little distant from him. Darius is highly skilled, and people hold him in high esteem for his musicianship and ability to lead the congregation in heartfelt worship. However, he said that while on one level he believed God loved him, on another he felt that he was hiding a theological secret. Darius struggled with the idea of a God who could be so punishing, and he constantly feared that if he was not perfect, somehow without blemish, he could lose his salvation and spend eternity in hell. I mean, that's what they taught him in the beginning. That's what he thought he was reading in the Bible, even though they said God loved him and, quote, he was saved. But fearing that God was continually angry at him, Darius struggled with anxiety and depression and experienced intrusive thoughts about having sinned. He started reading books on deconstruction and listening to podcasts that were considered, quote, progressive. And at this point, he didn't know what he really believed. But he started to feel angry, and he didn't know why. And after some time working together, Darius revealed to me that he felt, and I quote, betrayed by God. It was as if the dam of cognitive dissonance broke and the rushing waters of angry thoughts and feelings about God he had thus far managed to keep at bay suddenly came crashing through. And after confronting the version of God he had been taught his whole life, Darius felt angry that he was in relationship with what he called a schizophrenic God. Now, I know as a mental health professional that's not really schizophrenic, but as a side, that's what he said. And he blamed God for the anxiety and depression he developed in response to all that, quote, legalistic doctrines he had been taught. And was also angry that God could send people to hell for eternity. He felt God, quote, gaslighted him. And he talked about wanting to extract himself from a relationship with what he considered an abusive deity. He was experiencing something highly reminiscent of what psychologists refer to as betrayal trauma. And according to researchers, and I quote, betrayal trauma occurs when the people or institutions on which a person depends for survival violate that person in a significant way. Betrayal trauma is most often examined in reference to, yes, childhood physical, emotional, or sexual abuse. And a core principle of betrayal trauma is that, and I quote, the way in which events are processed and remembered will be related to the degree to which a negative event represents a betrayal by a trusted, needed other. Are you making the connections? In other words, the more dependent we are on someone and the more we trust them, the more severe the trauma will be if we are betrayed. And researchers have shown that, quote, traumas high in betrayal are linked with greater severity of PTSD, anxiety, dissociation, alexithymia, inability to describe or express one's feelings, and depressive symptoms relative to traumas low in betrayal. Within the betrayal trauma concept is the term betrayal blindness, which relates to how victims may be blind to trauma out of a desire to keep a relationship intact. An example would be a woman in an abusive relationship who denies how badly she is being abused so as not to lose the relationship. And this blindness stems from a need to maintain the attachment relationship at all costs and may involve denial, suppression, repression, and dissociation. And another strategy victims of betrayal use to avoid fully acknowledging the perpetrator's betrayal and abuse is to unconsciously and tragically blame and shame themselves. And I quote here, someone saying, "The reason why he belittled me was because I deserved it. If I was not so dumb, then he would not have yelled at me like that." I've heard that before as a therapist. Returning to Darius, there seems to be a strong resemblance between the experiences identified in betrayal trauma theory and Darius's thoughts and actions in his relationship with God. And we could place Darius as the victim in this relationship and God as the perpetrator. And when I discuss God as the perpetrator, I do not mean God in an objective metaphysical sense. I mean the version of God that Darius has been taught. I mean, the brain doesn't care if the images and ideas of God that are presented to it are objectively or metaphysically true. The brain acts on what it believes to be true, regardless of how this corresponds to reality. And the psychological and physiological consequences of these images and ideas will follow, whether beneficial or harmful. And so for Darius, the outcome was an idea of a God that was cruel and punitive, harsh, and controlling, yet also loving, kind, and gracious. This picture maps quite neatly onto the pictures we generally see in the victims with an abusive partner. Darius was in a relationship with a cruel deity, yet as soon as his betrayal blindness abated to a certain level, he was better able to see his God for who he really was. And while his God may have been loving and gracious at times, this God could also be unpredictably harsh and judgmental. And previously, Darius would criticize himself and believe that he was a horrible sinner rather than see God for who he was, or that version of it, a temperamental God prone to gaslighting and abuse. And Darius would see his struggle with mental and emotional problems as something he deserved. So sad. And, because God is just, Darius' sins warranted the punishment of decreased joy. And as Darius trusted his God immensely, the level of betrayal he felt was very deep. Darius stated, "I just can't believe I fell in love with that kind of God." Thankfully, once folks stopped taking the poison the church was offering, like Darius, they can and they do recover. And many people feel freer than ever. As one person told me, it's like I am born again. Church Factitious Disorder Imposed by Another and religious trauma, along with the struggle of betrayal trauma, is real. And for some, in hindsight, it did. It felt like being in an abusive relationship. For others, it felt like being in a relationship with someone with factitious disorder. Thankfully, trauma does not have to have the last word. Many do find themselves anew and revitalized on what is typically a long road to recovery. And may that be your story as well. Wishing you well. Take care. Till next time.